consider this. What were the gods of the Greeks like? Describe for me the gods of the Greeks. Angry, she said. Vengeful. Can you name any? Apollo? Zeus? Pardon? Diana? Okay, and if you think about these gods, were these gods, did they reveal, in any of the Greek gods, do you see the character of Jesus revealed in those gods?
No.
What character do you see revealed in the Greek gods? Petty? Arbitrary? Childish even? Yes.
Well, the pagan gods in general were just a reflection of the sinful human condition.
So the pagan gods reflected petty human traits and characters. Do you think that when Paul presented Jesus, this concept of a God who was selfless, who instead of demanding sacrifice from human beings to work on them, here's a God who was sacrificing himself for us? Wait, I've never heard anything like this. How can this be? You mean we don't have to earn favor? We don't have to bring sacrifice? We don't have to... That this God is actually reaching out because we have a need? You think this was striking a chord that was something unheard of? That was like, wow, this kind of God, I could like this God. This is from Rediscovering the Scandal of the Cross by Green and Baker from InterVarsity Press. It says, among the Greeks and Romans, then, sacrifices were offered in recognition of the supremacy of the gods and in exchange for their favors. Walter Burkitt refers to this function of worship as crisis management. Although he is aware that in ancient Greece, sacrificial rites fostered a fellowship among the worshipers who share in the sacrificial meal, he also recognizes that adversity teaches prayer. And this is a quote from Walter Burkitt. It says, all the great crises that leave men helpless, even when united, may be interpreted as caused by the wrath of the stronger ones, gods and heroes. Bad harvests and infertility of the soil, diseases of men and cattle, barrenness of women and abnormal offspring, civil wars, and defeat by a foreign army. Conversely, if these powers are appeased, all kinds of blessings must return, rich harvest, healthy children, and civil order. The traditional means to secure the one and prevent the other are sacrifice and prayer, especially in the form of vows. And then Green and Baker go on, this does not mean that the Gentiles among whom Paul proclaimed and whom he wrote concerning the cross of Christ were well prepared culturally for this message. It does mean, however, that Paul's Gentile audiences were likely to read the story of the cross with a certain guiding presuppositions. Chief among these would be the arbitrariness of the gods, whose anger must be turned away and whose benefit must be sought. It is puzzling, this is Green and Baker now, after they document this pagan God construct that we've talked about so many times, these arbitrary gods who will punish if you don't do what they want, if you don't appease them with offerings, but if you do, you can get good stuff out of them. After describing this, this is what they say. It is puzzling that many of our American readers share these same assumptions about God, in spite of the fact that neither the scriptures of Israel nor Paul himself support this view. Isn't that fascinating? Because have you not heard this God construct taught in America? That if you don't, God is either appeased by the blood of his son, or Mary and all the saints are pleading to hold back his anger and wrath. If you don't do what he says, he's going to reach out from heaven with fire or lightning bolts and get you. The whole lightning bolt fire thing comes from Zeus. Send lightning bolts down if you don't do what he says. Thoughts about this? So here Paul comes with a message in the context of the mindset. Gods are angry. Gods are upset. If you don't do what they want, they'll punish. But if we work hard, if we bring them good payments, if we make vows, then we can get them on our side to fight for us. Watch out for us. Give us blessings. And Paul comes and says, no. God is like Jesus. And he describes this selfless, loving, caring being who is constantly seeking our good all the time. Is it any wonder it had some traction? Paul and Silas come to town, And they don't act like the pagan priests. When a pagan priest would come, what would the pagan priest do? With pomp, circumstance, expectation, want money to be given, put up with the nicest stuff, demand various service, but Paul and Silas come and they begin serving. They won't take money for themselves. They won't even take bread. They do the nets and so forth to make money to provide their own way, because they want to be service to the people rather than to be served by the people. And people are going, whoa, this isn't how religion works. We're supposed to, this is something weird here. Things are turned upside down. And I think you're exactly right. Their ministry to the community was different than what you typically see. Typically, the priests and their various minions would be served by the community rather than served to the community. So again, it's a great contrast. In the last paragraph, it says, sentence, but our confidence in God is even more solidly grounded when it is based in the clear teaching of his word. You see, the lessons tried to make the case that Paul gave them the word, they believed the word, and that's why they had confidence. And so we have confidence when we read the word, and we just have confidence in the word. Well, if that was really true, if our confidence is grounded in based in the clear teaching of his word, why are there so many Christian denominations and so many disagreements even within the same denomination if the word is so clear? Is it because the word is vulnerable to cultural interpretation? The lens of culture in which the word is read affects what the persons get out of the word. The word is vulnerable to being bent or warped based on the lens one reads the words through, and that lens is affected by the culture of the time. Is that possible? Well, if you do a little study, you'll find that's exactly what's happened. Most of the atonement models that we have been warped or created based on the lens and the construct of the mindset of the people when they go to the Word. And is this magnified, this warping of the Word, magnified because of a teaching within Christianity that suggests you can only study the Word in isolation, divorced from all other evidence of life and science and nature? And when you dissect the Word out away from the reality of God's universe and study it in isolation, without the balancing hand of the laws of nature, without the balancing hand of reason and experience, we just study it internal to itself with the human mind and lens that we bring, then it seems to me it's really vulnerable to all types of misinterpretation. I want to suggest a new method in our study of God, and I call it the integrative evidence-based approach. The integrative evidence-based approach that requires the integration and harmony of three threads of evidence: Scripture, laws of nature and science, and your experience. All three have to be harmonized. If there's disharmony, then amongst those three threads, then in some place, it could be your experience, it could be your understanding of science, it could be your understanding of Scripture, some place there's misunderstanding, because proper understanding will bring harmony to all three. This is my suggestion. When you study Scripture divorced from science and nature, you get all types of distortions about God and who he is, how he works. In fact, somebody just came up to me and said, there was right before class that they just read a study that was done on cultures that teach a belief in God who is forgiving versus cultures who teach a very strong hell message and punishing God view. And then they looked at crime rates in those cultures, and the early data is suggesting that cultures with a forgiving God have higher crime than cultures with a punishing, hell torturing God. Now, anybody have an idea why that is? Because, I'm going to tell you, it's because of the lens of the law they look through. They are reading Scripture divorced from the laws of nature, and so when you consider that God's law is an imposed law, not a natural law, then the problem with breaking an imposed law would be like the speed limit. That's an imposed law. If you know that in Collegedale, this is funny, everybody laugh, they never give tickets. Yeah, that's funny. Okay? If you know, though, there's speed limits posted, but in Collegedale, 100% of the time, everybody is always forgiven. Nobody's ever given a ticket, ever. Would that lead to more people driving the speed limit or more people speeding? Okay? When the law is imposed, arbitrary, and you believe in a forgiving God, there's no consequence to doing evil, so just do evil because he's going to forgive everybody. So the problem isn't in believing in a forgiving God. The problem is misunderstanding God's law as imposed or arbitrary, and the only problem with it is that God has to punish you if you break it. But if you understand God's law, in fact, is the design protocol upon which he constructed life to operate. So, as we've talked in here, the most immediate example that brings it home so nicely is the law of respiration, that we are designed to breathe. It's part of the physical protocol of our being. Now you're free to break that law. And God will forgive you for it. He will not punish you for breaking that law. If you tie a plastic bag over your head, an angel from heaven will not come down and inflict harm upon you. Or the law of gravity. You decide to jump off a 400-story building. God will not send an angel to break your legs when you hit the ground. If you decide to stop brushing your teeth, the second law of thermodynamics, thing tends toward disorder. If you don't put energy into a system, it decays over time. So you stop putting energy into your oral hygiene. God will not send angels to drill holes into your teeth. When you understand, but God still loves you. And think about this as parents. Parents raise your kids to brush your teeth. If the kids grow up, go move out and say, I'm not going to brush my teeth anymore. Will you love your children less? Will you be angry at them? Will you be unforgiving and mean-spirited toward them? No, you'll love them, you'll be forgiving. But what happens to their teeth? You see, God is a forgiving God. He doesn't have to hold us in a legal sense accountable and inflict punishment upon us because his law is the law upon which life is built. And this law is uncompromising. This is one of the ways, by the way, that the devil has power over us. How does he have power over us? I'll show you. Imagine somebody holds your head underwater. Once your head is underwater, you're out of harmony with the law of respiration. Law of respiration is a design protocol. And being out of harmony with that law, you're in a position that you, by force of will, cannot remedy. And if you don't get back in harmony with the law, there's going to be death that follows. When we're out of harmony in the way we live our life with the way God built things, then we are in a pathway of self-destruction. God doesn't have to. So God be forgiving while we're still dying. Does this make sense? One of the founders of our church about 100 and some years ago wrote the following regarding this idea of three threads of evidence. This is out of Christian Education, page 66. It says, in the study of science also we are to obtain a knowledge of the Creator. All true science is but an interpretation of the handwriting of God in the material world. Science brings from her research only fresh evidences of the wisdom and power of God. Rightly understood, both the book of nature and the written word make us acquainted with God by teaching us something of the wise and beneficent laws through which he works. And then out of another book called Education, page 130, rightly understood, both the revelations of science and experiences of life are in harmony with the testimonies of Scripture that to the constant working of God in nature. So we see these three threads, rightly understood, will be a harm, and they keep us in balance. You study science without Scripture, then you're in the risk of going off into evolutionism. Scripture without science, you're in the risk of going off to these weird theories of an imposed arbitrary God who must punish you and look just like the pagans of ancient Greece. It's only when we bring them together that we can actually have balance.